I hate doing the standard YouTube intro. The instinct for every YouTuber is to say, "What's up, guys? It's me." And I want to break away from that. I think I want to do a cold open for every YouTube video. About a month ago, a few friends and I went to Emerald City Comic-Con, and since then I've been doing a ton of freelance work, doing taxes, most importantly, moving here, which is a new apartment that I'm super excited to be living in. I think it's a really cool place. But when we were at Comic-Con, I bought these 3 Bandai models. I got an X-Wing Starfighter, I got a TIE Fighter, and I got a Y-Wing Starfighter. All of these are classic ships from the original trilogy, and I just really want to build some Star Wars models, so I got these 3. I was initially just going to get the Y-Wing Starfighter because of the amount of detail in all the greeble and the pieces, but I was at Comic-Con and I was like, you know what, these are pretty cheap here, I'm gonna get 3 of them. So I got these 3 and I decided to build them in this order. The reason for that is because the X-Wing, it's not the least exciting to me, but I've done a lot of X-Wing building in my life throughout Lego models and whatever. And what I know about X-Wings is they can be tedious to build because you have to build everything on the wings 4 times. That includes decals, that includes the engines, that includes the guns, any panels, everything. And so I wanted to get that one kind of out of the way. Even though I'm really excited to do it, I wanted to get it out of the way first because it's the most daunting to not have done. So if I'd done one of these first, then I'd be looking forward to the X-Wing and being like, I have to do all those wings. If I do this one first, then I'm kind of getting it out of the way, and now I'm like, okay, we've done the tedious one, now we get to do the cool ones. Except they're all cool. That's the fun of it. So before I built the X-Wing, what I wanted to do was build this guy. This came with the X-Wing set. It's a 1/44th scale. The rest of these are 1/72nd scale. The actual X-Wing and the Y-Wing and TIE Fighter are 1/72nd scale. It's about this long. But this one came with the X-Wing, and it was just kind of a practice since I haven't done a model in a while. It was kind of a practice to see how the wash works, see how the decals go on. I tried some of the water slip decals, and I was like, you know what? These are not. I'm not patient or disciplined enough to do those water decals. So I just went with stickers, and I think the stickers turned out pretty good. So that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the model process for all 3 of these. And so now that I've done that mini model, I think it's time to move on to the full one. So without further So I'm trying some different camera techniques and lighting situations to try and find the best way of doing these kind of videos. I've never really made a model making video before, so I want to try and find the best way to show the detail I'm seeing while I'm making it being built to you at the same time. It's a lot more difficult than it seems because my hands are not free to put the camera in the right place, and my eyes are not free to check the camera all the time because I'm focusing so much on putting the model together. So I still think I need to find a better way of showing that detail, but this is kind of an attempt to move in that direction, try and find the best way to show the construction. You'll notice the X-Wing build, the physical construction of the X-Wing model is a relatively short time. I think it only took a couple hours to actually build the X-Wing physically, but the large part of making the X-Wing look nice is the wash and the decals. This X-Wing comes with over 100 decals, most of which I actually used, and it's It's kind of a daunting task because you don't really notice when you look at a picture, but there are tons of tiny little insignias and triangles and stripes and rectangles and little warning signs all over this vehicle. And it's a lot of fun to put all the decals on, but it's just like by the end, you're like, I just did 3 wings of decals and I have to do the 4th wing of decals because otherwise it's not going to look good, but there's so many to put on here. I'm not using any glue on these pieces yet, and that's because I want to make sure if I need to disassemble this either to reach some interior pieces with paint, or if I need to put a piece on that requires other pieces to come off first, that I didn't trap myself with glue. And the model holds together pretty well without any glue. In fact, I would say you could build this model without using glue at all. It's just going to be a little more fragile. Later on, this actually does happen to me, where I glued in the panels for the landing gear on the back because they were so flimsy and they'd fall out on their own without glue. But after I glued them in, I realized I needed to add a piece to the intake, and that piece required those pieces to be taken out. So I had to pry them back out and then glue them back in. And that's just kind of the thing I'm trying to avoid with the rest of the model here. It was just unfortunate that the one piece I didn't realize I needed to put in was underneath the very pieces, the only pieces that I decided to glue earlier before the end of the model. I love looking back at this video to see the pure white plastic before I add any wash to the X-Wing. You'll notice I did add a little bit of wash to the interior and to that dorsal part where the greeble is behind the astromech droid, as well as testing the new wash that I purchased on those engines just a little bit. I knew I didn't want to get too much wash on them yet, but also that I would be washing them much more heavily later on, so I wasn't worried about washing them too early. I also love washing, so it was hard to not jump in a little bit, at least wash something and see how that detail really shows up with the wash. With the windows on these sets, they give you a little bit of a choice, and it's kind of a difficult choice because they give you 2 different styles of window. They give you a transparent piece, which is completely transparent, and it's actually 2 pieces. It's the back of the cockpit window that is glued or fastened to the actual body of the X-Wing, and then it's the opening hinge part of the window that you can put at any angle you want. But they also give you, to use instead, an opaque window frame that has no glass panel, no actual physical window, just the frame. And it looks more like the style that's in the films, but it does not come in 2 pieces for you to actually position it in an opened position. And that's pretty disappointing to me because I myself am not confident in my ability to split that piece into 2 separate pieces in order to keep it open. Luckily with the X-Wing, I wanted to do the transparent pieces anyway, so I decided to go with those and keep the window open. But moving forward, I think I really like the look of the opaque window frames, and that's probably what I'm going to do on the TIE Fighter and the Y-Wing. Although I'm not going to be able to open the Y-Wing's cockpit because the window frame is closed, and that's the only way it comes. Here's where we get to my absolutely favorite part of model making, especially something so grungy as an X-Wing starfighter, the wash. And for those of you that don't know what a wash is in model making, it's very simple. It's a very thin black paint, sort of, that you just completely cover whatever you're trying to wash in this, and it will seep into all the little crevices and cracks, and it's very good for, you know, old World War II tanks or things that need a bunch of oil leakage, and it just makes something look so much more lived in, so much more worn down, and I love applying it. You just get a huge glob of it on your paintbrush and just paint it over the model, and then what I like to do is take a Q-tip and wipe it down. Specifically on the X-Wing, wipe it in the direction from the front of the X-Wing toward the back, so that you get that windswept feel. And you also get the paint in all of those little panel lines. And it just really turns this model from a little plastic toy into something I could see being in a movie. A very realistic looking miniature. And the process is just so much fun for me. I decided to make the X-Wing with the landing gear down and with the S-foils closed. That's the wings. A lot of people like to do the S-foils open in attack position and display the X-Wing as if it's flying. Obviously, that's the more dynamic choice. I can see why people do that. But personally, I like to have the X-Wing displayed as more of a utilitarian vehicle rather than a heroic fighter. I realize that Star Wars to a lot of people is this magical journey, the archetype of the hero's journey, and so the X-Wing kind of reflects that. And when you model it in such a dynamic pose, it is a fantasy thing, but when I model it, I kind of want it to be this down-to-earth, very grounded, you know, it is what it is. It's a vehicle. And I kind of want to display it as something that's not necessarily dynamic or exciting. It's just this piece of machinery. And just try to make it look, you know, as realistic for the universe as it can. I love when the Star Wars universe feels like a real universe. That's when it's best to me. A lot of this next part is just more placement of decals, and I know it's not super exciting to talk about decals, but that is just what is going on here. This video should be called More Decals because that is just how many there are. It is definitely a big undertaking to get all these on here. That's part of the reason I only went with one stripe on the X-Wing wings themselves. They give you the option to do up to 5 stripes on each wing. If you take a look at Luke's X-Wing from the film, he's got 5 stripes, and it's because he's red 5. And this X-Wing right now is red 1 because it's got 1 stripe on each wing, where Luke would have 5. And they give you individual stripes to add, which maybe I will do later to get it to be one of the other ones. But as it is right now, it's just, I was so exhausted after all of the decals that I did put on there. I was just not willing to put in the effort to do the extra stripes, at least at the time. In about a second, I'm going to get out the paints. And I, at first, only got them out to paint a couple things, but I ended up using the paints actually quite a bit, mostly dark gray and black. One of the first things I paint with the dark gray is this area right behind the window, where the window would attach, and it's supposed to be the same color as the window frame, but I did not have that shade of blue, so I just used a dark gray, and I think it turned out pretty well. Other than that, I used black to paint some of the greeble on the dorsal part, as well as the scorched areas between the intakes and the actual jet engines themselves. I think that actually added one of the most iconic features, at least to me, that made it feel more like it belonged in a movie, where the engines actually feel kind of scorched. I also painted some of the paneling on the inside of the cockpit, as well as that rear panel that's just covered in greeble on the main body. I end up also painting the landing gear dark gray. Here you can see is where I pry off those pieces and add the extra little intake piece. You can tell what I added because it's a bright white color and it's unwashed, but I wash it obviously by the time I'm done. I did do some paint on the inside of the transparent piece in order to keep light from leaking through just on the parts where the opaque frame is meant to be. The sticker goes on the outside and does the job for me on the exterior, but on the interior I did a very, very careful paint job to get the frame to look just a little less translucent. Finally, I painted the nozzle on each jet engine a dark gray as well to contrast with the white that is the rest of the engine. And I think that actually really brought a nice final touch to this as well. And aside from the minor things that I painted, I think you could get away without painting this model at all because most of the color work is done with the decals. You would probably still want to wash it, but the decals deliver so much in the way of color and detail that they give you pretty much everything you need to make this kit into, I would say, a film-ready miniature. Here's the finished full-size 1/72nd scale X-Wing. I think it turned out super nice. I'm very happy with it. I might go back and paint the astromech droid because it's kind of just pale white right now. But overall, really happy with how it turned out. Why is this not focusing? That's my least favorite thing about webcams. I can't tell them where I want them to focus. Look at that. It looks like right out of the movies. I actually really like the way the bottom looks as well. You never really get to see the bottom of an X-Wing, but it's got some nice detail. I love how the panel lines came out. The stickers did a pretty good job for not being decals. It's a nice little model. I'm very happy with it. And I'm excited to do the TIE Fighter and Y-Wing. I think the TIE Fighter is going to be a lot easier to do, and I think the Y-Wing is going to be a lot more work in the building department and a lot less work in the decal department, and I think that's the kind of model I'll want to work on, so I'm excited to do those two. But for now, see you guys later.